Greetings. My name is Bryce, also known as Bert. Today on Age of the Classics, we will begin looking at a series called Meet Abigail. It's about a young girl who has a nose for the news and an inquisitive mind. So let's dive right in. Chapter 1. Good news.
Click, clack, clackety. Abigail smiled as she typed. She loved the sound the typewriter keys made as they struck the paper, and the ping of the bell when she got to the end of the line. She loved the way the inky smell of the typewriter ribbon and the way the black letters looked as they marched across the page, telling a story the way she wanted it told. It was a hot afternoon in August. Abby and her best friend Ruthie were in Abby's room writing a newspaper for Abby's dad. Abby was not a very good typist. She used only her two pointer fingers, and she made a lot of mistakes, which she had to X out. But Dad never minded. Every night when he came home from work, he gave Abby the real newspaper so that she could read the headlines and the baseball scores and the funnies. He was always very pleased when Abby gave him one of her newspapers in return. Abby finished the paragraph she was typing.
"Read me what you have so far, you see,"
said Ruthie. Abby cleared her throat and read.
"Ruthie Simmons and Abby Abigail are reading lots of books this summer, you see. Ruthie has read the Blue, Yellow, and Red Fairy books by Andrew Lang, you see. Yeah, you see. She is not reading the Lilac Fairy book, you see. I am interested in princesses and princes, so I like fairy tales, yeah," said Ruthie. "Abby Abigail is reading The Adventures of Robin Hood and His Merry Men. You see, I like the way Robin Hood tricksees the bad guys, yeah, the Sheriff of Nottingham, yeah," said Abby. "And the way he robs those rich people and gives their money to the poor people, yeah. I think it'd be great to live in Sherwood Forest."
"That's good," said Ruthie when Abby finished reading. "I like it."
"Me too,"
said Kit.
"What shall we write about now, yeah?" "Write about that Charlie and those cookies,"
said Ruthie. Charlie was Abby's brother, who was 16. Abby thought a moment. Then she typed,
"Congratulations to Charlie Abigail. He set a world record today by eating a whole plate of ginger snaps that were supposed to be for Mother's Garden Club, yeah? Charlie is going to college in a few weeks. He should try out for the eating team, you see."
Ruthie looked over Abby's shoulder and giggled as she read what Abby had written.
"Now what?
She asked. Abby picked up a pencil and put it behind her ear so that she'd look like a newspaper reporter.
"Well," she said, "we could write about how hot it is."
Ruthie nodded. Quickly at first, then slower and slower. Finally, she let her chin fall to her chest, closed her eyes, and pretended to snore.
"You're right,"
said Kit.
"Weather's boring. There aren't any people in it. This is supposed to be a newspaper, not a snoozepaper." "You could write about how your mother redecorated your room,"
Ruthie said.
"I think it's as pretty as a princess's room, don't you?" "Yeah."
Answered Kit with a crooked smile.
"It's okay, yeah. It's just a little too pink, you know? A little too pink for me, yeah. I'd rather sleep in a treehouse, like Robin Hood."
Ruthie shook her head.
You're crazy,
she said.
Yep, said Abby cheerfully.
She knew Ruthie was right, of course. Her room was pretty. Mother had redecorated it for her earlier that summer as a surprise. And as with everything Mother did, it was lovely. Abby's room was painted pale pink with white trim. There was a canopy bed as high and white and fluffy as a cloud, and a dressing table with a lacy skirt around it. The desk was white and spindly-legged. It looked too delicate to hold the big black typewriter that crouched on it. Mother had asked Abby to keep the typewriter in the closet, please, and take it out only when she used it. But Abby always forgot to put the typewriter away. Besides, she used it a lot. The typewriter ended up being on the desk all the time, even though it looked out of place in the frilly room. Abby squirmed on the poofy stool that had replaced her old swivel chair. She believed in telling the truth straight out, but so far she hadn't told Mother that she felt as out of place in the frilly room as the typewriter looked. Mother was so pleased with all the lacy pinkness and so sure the room was a girl's dream.
Which it probably is, yeah?
Abby admitted to herself.
Just not mine, yeah. The redecorating story's no good, you see, because Dad knows all about it. It's old news,
she said to Ruthie.
It's not new, you see?
Abby sighed.
I wish we had something would happen around here. Some dramatic change, yeah? Then we'd have a headline that would really grab Dad's attention, you see? Or like in the real newspapers,
said Ruthie.
Exactly,
said Abby.
Oh,
said Ruthie.
When my parents read the headlines these days, they get worried, yeah? News is always about that depression, you see? And it's always bad. Bad news. I don't think we want our newspaper to be like that, no?
Said Kit.
We want good news.
She knew there hadn't been much good news in the real newspapers for a long time. The whole country was in a mess because of the Depression. Dad had explained it to her. About 3 years ago, people got nervous about their money and stopped buying as many things as they used to. So some stores had to close down. The people who worked in the stores lost their jobs. Then the factories that made the things the stores used to sell had to close down too, so the factory workers lost their jobs. Pretty soon, the people who'd lost their jobs had no money to pay their doctors, or house painters, or music teachers, so those people got poor too. Abby was glad that her dad still had his job at his car dealership. She and Ruthie knew kids at school whose fathers had lost their jobs. They'd seen those fathers selling apples on street corners, trying to earn a few cents a day. Some kids had disappeared from school because their families didn't have enough money to pay the rent anymore, and they had to move. Dad said the Depression was like a terrible slippery hole. Once you fell in, it was almost impossible to get out. Abby knew the Depression was getting worse all the time because the newspaper headlines said so almost every night. But inside Kit's house, no dramatic changes worth a headline seemed to be happening. The girls were about to give up on finding any news, good or bad, when Charlie popped his head in the door.
"Hey, girls," he said. "Mother's Garden Club's here, you know. Better get downstairs quick if you want anything to eat. I saw Mrs. Carter already diving headfirst into the nut dish." "Thanks for telling me, yeah, Charlie?"
said Abby.
"Oh, boy,"
said Ruthie.
"maybe there'll be some cake for us. Maybe there'll be some news for us,"
said Abby. She grabbed her notepad and took the pencil from behind her ear.
"Come on, yeah?"
Abby and Ruthie thundered down the stairs. They slowed their steps in the hallway so they wouldn't sound, as Mother always said, like a herd of stampeding elephants. Mother liked things to be just so when the garden club ladies came. She brought all her best crystal, china, silver, and linen out and arranged her most beautiful plants on the terrace where the ladies met. Abby could hear the ladies' voices and the clink of their iced tea glasses out on the terrace now. Above all the other voices, Abby heard Mrs. Wolf complimenting Mother.
"Margaret,"
Mrs. Wolf was saying,
"your sponge cake is perfection. Mine is just that, a sponge."
Mrs. Wolf hooted at her own joke before she went on.
"Please, give me your recipe." "Well, I'd be glad to,"
said Mother, just as Abby and Ruthie stepped onto the terrace. Mother looked as cool and slender as a mint leaf in her pale green dress. Abby wanted to fling herself at Mother and hug her, but she held herself back. Her fingers had typewriter ink on them. It would never do to leave ink stains on Mother's perfect green dress. Mother smiled when she saw the girls. Then she turned to her guests and said,
"Ladies, you're Ruth Ann Smithens and my daughter Abby, don't you?" "Yeah, of course we do,"
said the ladies.
"Hello, girls." "Hello,"
said Abby and Ruthie politely.
"Do help yourself to some refreshments, girls, yeah,"
said Mother.
"We will,"
said Abby and Ruthie, smiling broadly. The girls filled their plates and retreated to a corner behind a potted palm to enjoy their feast and observe the ladies. At first, the ladies discussed garden club business, such as how to get rid of bugs, slugs, and other garden pests. It was pretty boring, although the girls did get giggly when Mrs. Wilmore said she was just beside herself because she had spots on her phlox. Then the talk moved on to who was going to weed the flower bed at the hospital, which the garden club ladies took turns doing.
"I believe it's my turn, yeah?"
said Mrs. Howard.
"But I'm afraid I won't be able to weed this month, in fact."
She hesitated and blinked her big round eyes.
"I'm afraid I won't be able to be part of the garden club at all anymore, yeah?"
Abby and Ruthie looked at each other and raised their eyebrows. This sounded interesting. Why would Mrs. Howard be quitting the garden club? Abby leaned forward so that she could hear better.
"There may be a story in this for our newspaper,"
she thought. All the ladies murmured that they were sorry, and Mother said,
"Oh, Louise, that's too bad." "Well,"
said Mrs. Howard,
"I'm moving to Chicago. My husband's already there, and so my son Sterling, and I are going to join him. He's pursuing a business opportunity. Yeah, you see? Ah,
said all the ladies brightly. They all knew what that meant. Abby did too. It meant that Mr. Howard had gone to Chicago to look for a job. Everyone knew that Mr. Howard had not had a job for 2 years, ever since the company he worked for here in Cincinnati had gone out of business.
where will you live in Chicago?
A lady asked.
I'm not sure yet.
Said Mrs. Howard, blinking again.
Mr. Howard hasn't settled anywhere. No, we'll be hither, thither, and yon for a while.
The lady smiled, but Abby saw little lines of concern on their faces. The whole thing sounded pretty fishy to Abby.
If the Howards have no place to live in Chicago, why are they leaving their house in Cincinnati?
She wondered. Then suddenly it dawned on her. The Howards couldn't stay in their house. They didn't have enough money anymore. And Mr. Howard didn't have a job or a place for them to live in Chicago either. That was the truth. Abby was sure of it. She was pretty sure that there was an awkward silence. Then Mother spoke up and made everything better.
I have a marvelous idea, Louise,
she said to Mrs. Howard.
We'd love it if you and dear Sterling would stay in our guest room until your husband settled in Chicago. Yeah, and sense for you. Sterling's about Abby's age. I think they'll get along beautifully. Yeah, you see?
Ruthie nudged Abby, but Abby held her finger to her lips to signal Ruthie not to say anything. The ladies turned toward Mrs. Howard, waiting anxiously for her answer to Mother's invitation.
Well,
said Mrs. Howard slowly.
if you're sure it isn't too much trouble, Sterling, I'd love to stay. Yeah, thanks. That's all settled then,
said Mother calmly. All the ladies brightened up, as if a cloud had blown away. Abby started scribbling notes on her notepad, and Ruthie whispered to her,
Who's this boy Sterling?
Abby shrugged.
He's Mr. Howard's son, yeah, I guess,
she said.
I haven't met him. You will,
said Ruthie.
He's gonna be living in your house. It looks like it,
said Kit. She liked the idea. Boys were always up to something. Sterling was sure to be a good source of stories for her newspaper for Dad. And it would be nice to have a boy around, especially after Charlie left for college. She and Sterling could play catch together. They could talk about the Cincinnati Reds baseball team, which Abby loved, and Ruthie, quite frankly, didn't care about. And Sterling could join in when she and Ruthie acted out stories from the books they read. Abby grinned at Ruthie.
When we play Robin Hood, Sterling can be the sheriff of Nottingham. Yeah, boys like to be them bad guys.
Ruthie had a big bite of cake in her mouth. She swallowed, then grinned back at Abby.
Well, you never know, do ya? Sterling might want to be Prince Charming, perform good deeds. Yeah, you see? He's already done one good deed,
said Abby.
What's that? Come on,
said Kit.
I'll show you.
The two girls slipped back inside the house and ran up the stairs to Abby's room. Abby stood in front of the typewriter.
Sterling's giving us a headline. Look at that.
Abby typed in capital letters.
The Howards are coming.
Join us next week as we explore Chapter 2.
Read on!